put a grass strip here. Now, everybody knows we're up to our ass in grass in Ireland, okay? And I don't think that this is really necessary to put another green strip in here. I think Ireland has plenty green.
Jay Cashman does business around the world, but nowhere is as dear to him as Ireland. Ireland is where Jay's forefather, James Cashman, set off for America in 1850. Jay is invested in the community, where he owns a house and business in County Kildare, the same county in the midst of a bold bike lane project. And as with Boston's bike lane initiative, there are any number of opinions whirling around the issue, and Jay wanted to compare and contrast the planning methods implemented on either side of the Atlantic Ocean. As we've said, Jay talks to people, so he reached out to Ivan Keatley of the Kildare County Council and Martin Hayden, Minister for Agriculture, Food and the Marine.
They're actually doing some trials, which I thought was brilliant. Rather than just go and build 20 bike lanes and then find out that they don't work, because these things imposed in city streets has only been a recent revelation.
At a national level, from a government perspective, we have been developing a kind of an active travel plan where you're trying to encourage the use of cycleways and walkways for pedestrians, take away people's dependency on a car. So when you think of climate challenges we have, emissions and all of that, and how we're all better if we're more active, and we've got into a habit of driving all our kids to school when in a lot of instances, if the infrastructure is right, they can cycle themselves to school and their own independence and their own exercise and all of that. So as a government, we've put a lot of money aside for that, both this government and the previous one, to try and get that modal shift and to get that change. And in Ireland, we have a lot of people when they hit 17 and you can get your provisional licence, particularly if you don't live in the cities, feeling straight away that you have to get a car and all the costs to go with that, because they feel if you live in rural Ireland that you're a little bit isolated. So we've invested a lot in public transport as well. The local Link bus now does a lot of that, and we're trying to move away from the point where that 17, 18-year-old absolutely feels it necessary to have the car to be able to connect to broader public transport. But I suppose we've learned a lot in recent years about the challenges of changing that infrastructure. And I think our local authorities, as well as nationally, Transport Infrastructure Ireland, are still learning in terms of that piece around delivery of publicly accepted changes to infrastructure. So we were talking earlier off air around public consultation and that engagement piece. And I've seen some examples of really poor infrastructure that hasn't benefited anybody. So in a nearby town here in Newbridge, we have cycleways that were put in. It was unfortunate that when the public consultation was done by the local authority, it kind of coincided around Christmas time. It wasn't picked up by the public. They got 7 submissions on this public consultation, which will tell you people didn't know it was coming.
Right.
And next thing then, where the cars park on the sidewalk or on the curb, as we call it, they were moved out and cycleways were put in the middle of the town, but with no infrastructure on either end. It annoyed everybody. It annoyed the businesses. It annoys the people who park the cars. Nobody cycles on it. If your car door opens, it can catch the cyclist. So it was wrong. And I think it was a great example why public consultation is so important, because some of the practical points that were raised by people complaining afterwards would have come up in the public consultation. So I think in learning how you develop these projects well and deliver what you want to deliver around public acceptance, but also that they work in how you want them to work, people's insight and lived experience of them is really important. I think that'd be your experience as well.
Yeah, and I suppose I'm a public rep. I'm a local councillor here, Jay, for the last 15 years, and I've seen both good and bad public consultation. And obviously the good stuff is the way more extensive, way better advertised for a longer period, when people get to not only put in submissions, but get responded to. When the answer by the local authority is given, that then they can come back to their local public representative and say, well, we don't agree that the council doesn't agree with us and we want you to do this on our behalf. And you can take a public consultation in its round then, and you can look at, and obviously the wider and the more people that are consulted and the more people that get involved in it, the better the chance you have of a more positive outcome for everybody. And we have a couple of examples of that around here. I mentioned to you in our local town here in South Kildare in Athy, where we have a brand new public space in Emily Square, where there was a really good and really extensive public consultation done. We had over 300 submissions as opposed to the 7 in Newbridge. And I think that's the difference. And that'll show you how good a consultation can be. And I think You've given a couple of examples yourself in Boston about, how that can work, and definitely the local authorities and the government need to look at that and make sure that we have what we've learned from a local cycle lane, that pilot project that you mentioned, local here to Kilkea, up in Mount Moon. Since that has come in, what we've learned is that not everybody is going to agree at the end of the day, but at least if people feel that they have been consulted and asked their opinion about what is important to them, then you have a good chance of bringing people with you. When you don't, it's a recipe for disaster, yeah.
It's hard to please everybody. If you're not getting like 65% of the people on board with what you're doing, you really should rethink it. Some things you can solve and some things you can't, okay? But at least you basically did everything you could, okay, to basically please as many people as you can.
This group of men reached a consensus that seems like it should be obvious. Talk to the people. Sure, it's the harder way, but it's also the right way.
On the broader point around delivery of infrastructure, and we have this challenge where in our planning system for some big infrastructural projects nationally, one or two objectors can stop a factory being built that would employ hundreds of people. We're changing the planning rules now somewhat around their ability, their recourse to take that project to court or whatever and hold it up for years. And at its heart of those changes we're bringing about is the fact that it's about getting the balance between an individual's right to apply to build something, and an individual's right to have a say on that planning application, whether it's an objection or a submission, and then the common good. And the common good has to come back to the heart of it, and it's what struck me when you talked about the 65%. The broad acceptance that government or local authorities or business shouldn't be delivering a project that nobody wants.
Absolutely. Or haven't been consulted in.
A lesson the Wu administration should have learned. But shockingly, as Jay Cashman conferred with his Irish associates in the dining room at Kilkea Castle, nearly 3,000 miles away in Boston, Mayor Michelle Wu's crews were tearing up more infrastructure and making additional changes to Boston's streets without consent. On Arlington Street, essentially the gateway to the Back Bay, Wu's crews ripped up flex posts and installed so-called zebra barriers. All this despite the mayor's own review on the matter, which specifically singled out Arlington Street's problematic bike lanes. The review declared that the Arlington Street bike lane did not seem to be receiving ridership in its current state, as riders were more often using the right lane, and that residents were concerned with blind spots. Indeed, Wu's report demanded, quote, "This project should be revisited and the bike lane should be evaluated for relocation to the opposite right side of the street." The review also makes it very clear that Mayor Wu needed to re-engage the neighborhood before doing anything else. Instead of re-engage, the Wu administration chose to not engage. She'd gone rogue. Again.
I think it's interesting the point you're making about where the trial or the pilot that is currently being built, the one you speak about up in Moon. It's a very rural area. For me, from the outset, it was about, and you mentioned it yourself, it's about making it safer, not just for the pedestrian, not just for the cyclist, but also for the car, because the regional road that we're talking about there, the biggest problem was one particular junction where there was an awful lot of crashes. Cars were crashing because traffic lanes were overlapping, and people, when they were turning off, there was cars being blindsided by cars coming up their inside. So essentially for that section of road, it's nearly more of a traffic calming measure than it is an actual bicycle lane. The bicycle lane is really a kind of a consequence of trying to slow the traffic down and just make it safer for everybody. And to try and figure out a way of getting pedestrians and cyclists from one side of a junction to the next, with the least amount of contact with the traffic. I know a friend of mine who was in Amsterdam recently was telling me, a city with millions and millions of people living in it, and you can get from the suburb into the city centre without coming into conflict with traffic, which sounds extraordinary, and I've seen it in action. Been over there a couple of times myself. But it can be done, and I think you made the point, with the right design, with considering the right things, it can be done. And that's in the perfect world, and we have that in our Blueway.
Have you been to the Barrow Blueway yet? It's great for a cycle, a walk, here to head.
In a tie now where we put a track along, where we use the old towpaths to put in cycle lanes, so your cyclists and your pedestrians and your joggers are going nowhere near traffic. That's the ideal, what you want. But there are cases where, as you said, the more urban you get, the greater the challenge is to try and, make people as safe as they can be.
You also have to, these barriers have to be, they really have to be able to stop something, because one of the things that they tried in Boston was these yellow cones, okay, that they put in the street. And what it does is it gives actually the bicycle a false feeling of safety, and they aren't safe. They're anything but safe, okay, and that's bad. Hampstead is a good example. I started going over there more than 35 years ago. I used to go there quite a bit for different stuff. We're in the dredging business also. They're the best dredgers in the world, the Dutch. So I've had some experience over there, and 30 years ago, there were bicycles all over the place in Amsterdam. They were everywhere.
They have a culture of it, yeah.
Yeah, it was culture of me, but that goes back at least 30 years, and they were every place. I remember somebody gave me a ride home. I'm riding side saddle on the back of the bike, okay, like I'm saying, there's an old big time contract. I'm getting pedaled home to the Amstel Hotel, okay, and we've been drinking beers for for a while in there. But the thing is that is where you go to study it. How the heck did they do it? It's good that you went over there to take a look at that and see success in action. Okay, and that's the problem. People too much of a big hurry. I'm not saying delay things for permanently, but the more complex the project, the more it takes planning. And what you're doing here, so you build a mile of road or 2 miles, whatever you're going to build, and then you basically learn from that. Okay, now you got empirical data. There's nothing better than empirical data versus a theory based on traffic studies.
And that's what the National Cycle Pilot project is trying to achieve. So they've done some here in the locality that we talked about, and they've picked other points in different parts of the country, and they've picked different road types.
Brilliant.
So the road types they've picked here probably had the unexpected kickback locally. Was that because it's a straight regional road, which means it has a speed limit of 80 kilometers an hour. It's 100 now, and I'm going to drop to 80. And because there was a wide, hard shoulder on that stretch of road, some of the resistance and the opposition that has come from it is that people locally don't feel the road is dangerous on the straight. Now, we all recognise those junctions that Ivan talked about have been dangerous, and our motivation for trying to get the pilot money in to invest in this area was trying to fix the dangerous junctions. But people got upset saying that, this was a good wide road, it was really safe. The officials came along and said, look, we've done road safety tests and monitored speed, and there's some cars have done crazy speeds in this area, and it's actually not safe. It's very wide. And there, Ivan's pointing around the traffic cam, and we have a soccer club in the middle that has a big membership now, growing membership. They kind of got the local field off a local landowner and rented it off him out of all goodwill. So the local authority and the council wasn't really part of that. So it was never planned to be there. And then it grew, and its teams grew, and its membership grew. And then all of a sudden you've kind of 100 cars there on a Saturday when there's a couple of matches on together, and all of a sudden then this is something the council are concerned about and we're looking to trying to address. So then we were saying, well, can this pilot look to address that issue there? Make that road safer when there's matches and stuff there as well. The irony is, with a straight road with a big hard shoulder, people feel it's safe, even though cars are going very fast on it. They kind of think that's okay. But actually, when the designers come to look to narrow it, the idea is there that will bring the speed of the cars down, as well as the fact that the speed limit will drop on it. But it's kind of like when somebody contacts me about speeding in an area and say, we want ramps to slow down the cars. And I always say, look, I'm not an engineer. I'm a public representative. I will talk to the engineers in the council and say, what we need them to accept is that it's a speeding problem. Right. And if they accept that, well, then I'd be open to a professional engineer's viewpoint on how best do you address that. Do you put in a chicane? Like, if it's a ramp, you don't want a ramp near a house. Big truck going over it and it's dropping a gear at that time, it'll be really noisy. Rumble strips, again, can create unintended consequences there. So I suppose what they're trying to come up with here is engineering solutions to making it safer between the interaction between a car, a cyclist, pedestrian, jogger or whatever. And that's why on that stretch they've tried 4 different types of curbing, the aesthetics of it, how the car interacts, how the cyclist interacts and that. And they're doing it on that big wide road, but then in other areas they're going to try it on, and they've tried it on roads where it's narrower and stuff. And what's really important here is that you have detailed engagement, which there was a deficit of at the start of this job, definitely. That people are aware of what's coming. The biggest concern that started initially was people didn't know this was starting. A bit like you, with your thing in Boston, you found out maybe a few days in advance. some people, the first thing knew about was the builders were on site and there was all these bollards and traffic cones on the side of the road that made it feel really, really narrow immediately. And it was kind of getting dark. I know people who were driving and just thought, oh, this isn't safe at all.
A returning theme that keeps popping up around poor bike lane planning is the desire for the builder, let's say in this case the mayor, to prioritize ribbon cutting opportunities rather than proper planning.
Everybody wants, myself included, I want success as quickly as I can. The road to hell is paved with good intentions, as they say, right? You know, and so, like, you know, I want to get something done, and sometimes the worst business deals that I make is the ones I basically I leap before I really look where I was going to land. You know, I was telling the one about the gold digging up in Alaska, and I had to get up there because it was a dredging company. I could do it better than they were doing up there, right? And I did, and I mined $140,000 worth of gold, okay, but it cost me $5 million to do it. And that was my last big mistake, okay, in business, you know, and we learned so much from our mistakes, okay, versus, you know, being taught things and understand them. But to go out and be able to get that same response by doing a pilot is the way to go, you know. So
Because if it's a successful pilot, you'll learn about the things that don't work as well as the things that do. That's success. It's like you with the project.
Exactly. I mean, like, believe me, I learned more about my businesses by my failures than I ever learned by studying and thinking and so forth. You know, it comes home, you know.
At least in Boston, government has not shown an adeptness for planning bike lanes. But is there another role for the bureaucracy?
What about licensing? I'm concerned in Boston, there was a person who got killed about 3 blocks from my house. It was an electric bike. They came through and they blew a traffic light. And, you know, we don't have signage. You know, there's no, you know, when you're on a highway in Ireland, you know what the exit is. You know what the signs are. You know what to look at. You train. You know what the lines mean, right? And because we've been trained that way, and we get good signage in all these places. We don't have any signage in Boston. I don't think I've ever seen an actual bike sign. And I think that something that can go 30 miles an hour, whether it's powered by petroleum or it's powered from a battery, why shouldn't they be licensed? Why shouldn't somebody basically have to go and pass a test? They'd be registered. The thing that happened to the person who got killed in Boston is that they hired a detective because they couldn't get the name of the company that this biker worked for. He was actually making a delivery of some sort. And they hired a detective. They called us up and asked us if we know. I said, no, we don't. Okay, if they had a registration on that bike and the person had a license, you know, they'd be able to get some of that information.
Yeah, like, it is a big challenge. You know, the whole scooter area has come up very quickly, and even e-bikes now, just like they're getting so quick, so powerful. And like with a lot of things in new innovation, regulation and the safeguards around it can take a bit of time to catch up. But it is about the regulation you set down for the companies. But obviously, very quickly, we're going to have to get to a point of as you said, licensing, obviously identification of who the person is, some type of training how to use these appropriately. Like, there are some tragic instances with people on scooters who've lost their life or taken the lives of others, and the same with e-bikes. And I'm not sure, particularly considering it's young adults who don't have a car or the people who are on it, I'm not sure that realisation of exactly how bad things can go if you come off one of these at speed. I think that realisation is not there with younger people until we have better regulation in around that teaches you how to responsibly operate this, you know, use of helmets and all the rest, but then how you interact with everybody else. So, like, should you be out in the road, you shouldn't be on the footpath if there's going to be pedestrians there and you're using these speeds. So I think across the globe we're struggling with kind of catching up with the innovation of the products that have been developed.
There's certain rules of the road that you have to basically, or at least in engineering theory, we don't have to beta test that. We don't need to, you know, to do a trial on it because it's well known, always in the direction of the traffic. Why? Because in Ireland you do it the opposite of that. We look to the left, you guys look to the right. Okay, you know, and that's why I get all confused when I come over here. It's like, you know, yeah, I take an Uber or a cab. Okay, it's much safer, you know. So.
There are many infrastructure strategies that are shared across the globe, and many that are despised across the globe.
We did a lot of speed bumps here, and we're probably using them less now. Emergency services don't like the meter, so your ambulance or your fire brigade obviously have to navigate them. Wherever you put one in, you have to put a light in over it, so it actually makes it quite expensive for a local authority to put them in. But that was the biggest form of speed control that we would use in our towns and our villages up until relatively recently.
Over in Jamaica Plain, they put a bunch of speed bumps into streets that really didn't need it and driving people crazy, but they actually finally got rid of those. Again, it's very visual. People can take credit. Oh, we put speed bumps in there. I'm happy you guys are getting ahead of the science in this. Naturally, like I look at every bike lane as like, okay, what's the matter with this one, right? That's why I start with it, because I want good bike lanes, so I'm always critiquing them. And so now that you put them in, we'll see if that works. It very well could. Nobody's an expert, in my opinion, a true expert on bike lane engineering.
It's how it
maybe
works.
somebody in Holland, okay?
yeah, maybe. It's been doing it for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
But there's that and how that pilot works out. But as Ivan mentioned earlier as well, what's been hugely successful for us in Ireland in recent years has been our development of our Greenways and our blueways. So this is taking old railway tracks and turning them back into, and it's gone back into agricultural land. It's where the railway was years ago. But turning them into pathways now for leisure cycling. So there's some really famous ones. So we have the Barrow Blueway, which is the towpath of the Grand Canal of the Barrow Line. So it's about 48 kilometres from Lowtown and Robertstown down to Athy. It is a really big driver of economic activity for tourism, for glamping and for all these different bits. And it's a beautiful cycle, but your cycle, it's a leisure cycle, so it's not for a racer, it's more your mountain bike, your slower cycle, your family cycle. But you've taken the cycling away from interaction with the cars. So yes, you are crossing over roadways, but doing so in a safe way, taking your time going across. So you're seeing a part of the countryside you wouldn't normally see. And this old towpath, when Guinness used to bring its stout all over Ireland, it used the barges on the canal to do it. And it had big dray horses that were hooked to the canal, to the barge, and that's what
And I pulled them along.
pulled them along.
I tell you, I think it actually goes all the way down to Waterford and Wexford.
Yeah, so there are different ones, and we're trying to get them to connect. So there's going to be one from Dublin to Galway, and that's going to be fully connected. And at the minute, that's been developed in pieces. There's one in Waterford, and it's really, really popular. You're cycling into Dungarvan, the coast is all on your left-hand side. You go through an old railway tunnel, and you come out around it. Our kids love it. And all these cafes have, and restaurants and stuff have popped up along the way now where local people are developing businesses.
Oh, well, that's
so
terrific.
for rural areas that maybe didn't have much tourism, they're finding a huge boost now. So it's in Waterford. That's a greenway. So a greenway.
That's smart building. You know what I'm saying?
But
That's all
really
smart
good.
development.
Yeah, it's really good. And you find tourists now coming wanting to cycle and use all of these, and you're taking away that interaction between the bike and the car. Where you can, and local communities are really developing. So there's ways of doing that from the leisure cycle. I suppose the other pilots is about how can you use cycling on a day-to-day basis, whether it's in your city in Boston or what we're trying to do here in rural areas. Is there ways that we can, people who want to cycle to work or want to cycle to school can do that safely? Or to the bus stop to connect.
Right.
So as I said, our local link is something we're really proud of here in the locality that me and Ivan would have advocated for. And this is a local public bus service that links our rural areas and our towns and our villages in with the nearby towns. So we have a route that runs from Carlow to Naas, the two bigger towns nearby, and people can get on that bus now. So somebody who lives in a rural area here who would have felt very segregated, now technically can get on that, get to the bigger town, and then get to the city and get to the airport and go wherever they need to, but they don't necessarily need a car for that, or go visit a hospital, or young adults can go to the cinema and not need mom and dad to drive them and all that. So that connectivity piece is very much a part of it. It's not just about the cycleway. It's about the local bus. It's about feeling connected in your rural area. And for us in this rural part of South Kildare, that's really, really important, that you don't feel like a second-class citizen just because you're not living in a city.
And giving people the option of leaving the car, not bringing the car into the city. So we've a lot of people now parking at the motorway junctions, and it's something I'm advocating for now through the council, is to try and put in what we call park and ride facilities, so that your public and private bus can come up off your motorway and get back onto the motorway as quickly as possible. So you provide a car park, you provide a turning circle for them, pick up the passengers and get back onto the motorway as quickly as possible. But that allows people, and even if it's only 20 or 30 cars in each spot. So we've one at Mullamast here, and we've one down in Castledermot. And I think there's loads of room. There's one in Kilcullen as well. There's an area in Kilcullen there where we need, all up along the M9, we need to provide facilities for people where they can leave their car where there is public transport, and leave their bicycles, and leave, and give them options. Because if they don't have options, well, then you're going to stay in your car and you're going to be in that congestion. And we're seeing it on the M7. You know, it's hard to believe, you know, they're the biggest city we have now, and we've only recently widened the M7, but it's already congested. We added a third lane to the motorway, you know, overnight it was at capacity. So we have to figure out ways of helping people to use the public transport. It's not just about, the climate and trying to save Mother Earth, it's about giving people options,
And cars are so expensive. If you take that 17 or 18-year-old and you're trying to encourage modal shift and give them an appropriate amount of access to public transport that they don't feel the need for the car, the insurance for the car costs thousands, the car costs thousands to run it. There's real quality of life pieces here if we can get that piece right.
Not surprisingly, the conversation made its way back to the fundamentals of planning. But why do we need plans? In other words, what is the genesis of the ideas that require plans?
On the planning side, there's a little bit of chicken and egg. So one of the biggest drivers of development of active travel infrastructure is actually money. And is a government setting money aside to say, we're going to put so much X amount of state resources into facilitating this. This makes local authorities sit up and see. So, Ireland is divided into counties. Our county structure has a local authority, a county council, and they administer and manage a lot of stuff locally. So when they know there's a pot of money there then to look for, they'll go and they'll look for that. At the same time, you need that plan to be developed. But I think the point we're making around the plan is it's only as good as all the people who feed into it. Yes, engineers, but not just engineers and policymakers, people who live in that locality, who know how traffic interacts. While it was delayed on this project and it was late, I asked and forced officials to come down and engage when there was so much upset here locally and listen to the farmers, because their agricultural activity and their machinery movements is different and maybe hadn't been factored in. The hauliers had a different viewpoint. Local people who use the cars for different reasons or travelling at different times had their viewpoint. And that pilot will be better for everyone's views being heard. And that's why consultation early on is really, really important. So yes, you can have the best plan that's been designed in an office by people who have an expertise, but that's divorced a little bit from the reality of how everyone's going to interact with everyone and what people want in their locality. What do they want that for? Is it to get from A to B? Is it to get for a leisure loop of a route? Is it for everyday movement? Is it for your Saturday bike ride or Sunday bike or whatever? And then can it be delivered, and is the resources there to deliver it? So all of those things are intertwined, but you do need a good plan, but then you need to learn from the experience of actually trialing certain things and see what works and what doesn't work.
Martin mentioned how we don't have any, our railway is really depleted because we closed them all down in the 50s and 60s because the motor car came along and we said, well, let's just build roads and build motorways, and now we're realising,
You talk about being in a rush. We were in an awful rush. Rip up those antiquated railway, and now we're thinking, oh God, if only we had the railway lines. Then we're putting tracks down the middle of our cities for trams.
When they discontinued them, that was the automobile lobby basically shutting all that down, and they actually almost forced these railroads to go bankrupt, so the automobile could take over, and they built the interstate system.
Whatever the interstate system, whatever the project, builders like Jay know that we're not just building something for now. We're building for years from now. And maybe centuries from now.
Talking about something that lasts 800 years, and we started out talking about sustainable transport and what does sustainable mean, and it comes full circle back to what you're saying. We're all just trying to leave something behind that's going to last, going to benefit the next generation and the next generation, hopefully just a better way of doing things. That's all we're really talking about, isn't it?
There are other people who wanted the same sort of things around the world, okay? And I'm familiar with Ireland because, we have this hotel here, right? Plus I'm Irish. And
we're very grateful you're here as well, Jay.
Yeah, well, I'm grateful for you guys to be grateful, I've been really treated very nicely over here.
You're a great employer. You've invested in our area, and everybody had such pride here in the castle. We all just take such a source of pride in it being so well looked after and minded, and so many visitors getting to come and enjoy it now. So it's brilliant.
I'm just kind of passing through, okay? You know what I'm saying? Well, we're all just passing through this life, right? And so this is going to go on for centuries after me. I want to make sure on my watch we did a good job with that. That's kind of my goal, and to preserve something that I think is important, okay, valuable.
On the next Streets March, Jay Cashman faces off against a man who defends the rollout of Boston's bike lanes. Also, the element of transparency simply does not exist at Boston City Hall.